Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, your moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a very interesting webinar on tap here, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over first. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will be able to listen to it again on demand. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out a link that will take you to the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time you have a question for either of our panelists, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question. And we'll get to as many questions as we can near the end of today's presentation. And finally, we are doing a drawing for 3 $50 Amazon gift cards at the end of today's webinar. So please stick around. We'll do a random drawing. Hopefully your name will be one of the 3 I choose. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is 5 lessons learned from large-scale implementation of Kubernetes in the enterprise. Today's is going to be more of a fireside chat type conversation between our 2 panelists. And they are Sirish Raghuram, who is CEO at Platform 9, and Ravi Ravichandran, who is VP of Cloud Platform Engineering and Cloud Operations and DevOps at Juniper Networks. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. I'd like to real quick just kind of give the audience a little bit more information about yourselves. I'm starting with you, Sirish. Here, the bio that we have. You have a lot of really great experience. I'm very impressed. Your bio reads, having experienced virtualization, infrastructure as a service and cloud native industry transitions firsthand. Sirish believes that open source represents the future of enterprise hybrid clouds. Sirish is passionate about enabling IT ops in large enterprises to be successful with their cloud initiatives, being able to easily adopt and manage VMs, Kubernetes, and serverless at scale across any infrastructure with minimum management overhead and without breaking the bank. In addition, Sirish is focused on building Platform 9 across customers, employees, and partners, and as the industry leader in hybrid and multi-cloud. And prior to founding Platform 9, Sirish was an early engineer at VMware who went on to technical and management roles. His work at VMware led to several products, features, and patents. So Sirish, thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Our other speaker is
Ravi. To be here.
Oh, great. Well, I want to go ahead and before you guys get into your conversation, just tell the folks a little bit about Ravi Ravichandran, who is the VP of Cloud Platform Engineering at Juniper Networks. He has extensive experience in software as a service, cloud, DevOps, infrastructure, and 24/7 operations. Ravi has strong technical and business leadership experience in scaling operations across small, pre-IPO, medium, and Fortune 500 companies. Ravi, thank you also for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Right. Awesome. All right. Well, Sirish, I know you guys want to dive right into it, so I'm going to put myself on mute and let you have your conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. It's exciting to be here. It's a really exciting time for us to be in the cloud native space. Kubernetes has really changed how people think about not only infrastructure orchestration, but also how to build next generation applications to be multi-cloud and to how to better automate the operations of applications as well as the world increasingly adopts cloud services. I'm really excited also to be able to do this for the first time with Ravi. Before Ravi became a customer of ours at Juniper Networks, Ravi was the CIO of GE Digital, their Predix cloud platform. And Ravi, I think you went with a different tech stack there. Platform 9 was a very young company at the time. So, but I'm glad that you became a customer of the company, and we're here talking about your experiences with adopting cloud technologies like Kubernetes.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So one question I wanted to ask about, Ravi, is tell us a little bit about the technology stack you used before maybe Juniper. And I want to actually talk about that a little bit so the audience is able to appreciate how and why you decided upon Kubernetes in Juniper. So, but before we go to Juniper, tell us a little bit about, before Juniper, what are some of the tools and technologies that you've been looking at, and what are the experience with those technologies?
Sure. So in the last 25 years, I've done all kinds of operations, technical operations, cloud operations, SaaS operations, you name it. So it's, at the end of the day, has the market economy moved towards subscription-based economy, right? Everything became a SaaS, and the uh, service delivery and service SLAs became more important. That means that delivering the service in a highly reliable fashion is also key. So in the many years before, I've been on VMware and obviously been on middleware platforms in the past, right? And also been on Cloud Foundry platform at G Ratio. And obviously with the emerging technologies of Kubernetes nowadays, that's the de facto progression towards it, because the service-based economy demands of SLAs and all this stuff requires now some of the operational requirements are now built into the technology stack, right? That means that anything that you build today, whatever stack, it needs to be highly reliable, highly available, meet the SLAs, obviously holistic healing in case of failures, right? HA and meet all the disaster recovery in terms of whatever configuration it is in. Everything is now getting baked more and more into the technology stack, right? And given that, based on the past experience, platforms have never done well, right? From the middleware ages of DEA, WebLogic, and all other stuff, as you know, they all went away, right? They all died. And today, obviously, other platforms are existent, but still, what transpired to where we are today, one fundamental requirement is that you don't want to be sticky to any platform. You don't want any constraints a platform puts on you. You want to be able to scale. You want to be able to scale out. You want to be able to get all the operational requirements to meet the SLA in the platform at the same time. And as the technology evolves, and for all you know, this will continue to evolve to become highly reliable, you need to keep adapting to it. So getting stuck in a platform, getting stuck inside a platform with all the constraints is just impossible. It's a barrier for exit. As much as it's easier to buy into it, but barrier for exit, meeting those kind of SLAs, aggressive SLAs in delivering this to customers will become a nightmare. So you have to start thinking about in atomic forms of how you basically build a stack. And that's how we all now are thinking about Kubernetes in the marketplace, right? And also you're also looking at in terms of cost for the platform and licensing, all that stuff that continues to grow with you in a platform-based model or architecture. So you want to have a flexible architecture that's highly available. At the same time, gives you what you need in terms of cost, meet your budget and the cost and the pricing, and at the same time, technology requirements and the functional and non-functional requirements.
So your journey into Kubernetes was, to recap, a desire to build highly automatable operations,
Yep.
a desire to manage costs and efficiency,
Yep.
and a desire to manage lock-in or perceived lock-in into
Absolutely.
proprietary technology stacks and that don't keep up and don't evolve.
Yep.
And so those are some of the reasons
and also our automated provisioning, orchestration services, right? Automation is the key.
But beyond the technical feature set, these were the strategic elements why you were looking at Kubernetes as your technology.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you know, I've also worked on OpenStack in the past, and that pretty much is also some of the challenges, right? In the early stages of OpenStack, it was not even backward compatible for you to upgrade, right? So I've seen in many instances, some of the companies that worked we got left behind by 2 years and 3 years and 4 years, and we're using some of the older versions of OpenStack, and it would, as the timeline progresses of you not upgrading your software, you have a technical debt on a long term.
Yeah.
And it keeps building on, right? When it keeps building on, it just becomes impossible for you to upgrade at that point in time. And you are now impacted in terms of meeting SLAs, your reliability goals, availability goals, scalability goals, because you're so far behind in your upgrades.
So Ravi, I think what makes you somewhat unusual, I think, is you run, the application platforms like WebLogic at scale.
Yeah.
You run VMware at scale.
Yeah.
You run infrastructure as a service based on VMware at scale.
Absolutely.
You run Cloud Foundry at scale.
Yeah.
You run OpenStack at scale.
Yeah.
And so coming into Juniper, you were looking at Kubernetes. What are some of the lessons that based on your experiences running all of these technology stacks? Yeah. So I heard you just say one, which is upgrades was something that you were concerned about because you've seen in the past how difficult it is to upgrade from one version to the other, and then you're no longer able to take advantage of the latest and greatest capabilities that the community is working on.
That's one. The second one, stickiness, right? You don't want
like a fork, a proprietary, some kind of
proprietary platform or something which has inherent restrictions that you have to work within it.
Yeah.
You can go outside of it if you have to do a lot of work to get anything integrated into it, right? And the third one is obviously your ability to manage and do what is called day-to operations, right? That's the key, because in a subscription-based economy, software as a service, it comes down all the way down to how you deliver your service, right? So in that situation, you need to figure out your SLAs. You need to figure out automated operations that can scale out, that can be highly available, that can meet the aggressive SLAs on a global scale and a geographic scale, right? So all the things need to be automated, and as the technologies have evolved, some of them have started to build into it.
Yeah.
Example, Kubernetes clustering, right? High availability services, reliability services, right? All those things is very economical, so that you don't have to go build some DR site out there sitting passively waiting for it to be brought on during an incident or whatever it is. Those things and all, you can avoid it. You can now really get into real-time active service delivery effort.
Okay. So you said wanting to be able to upgrade easily, not wanting to get left behind on an old version of Kubernetes.
Absolutely.
Wanting to have an open, not being locked into a proprietary version of Kubernetes or something that had restrictions in terms of what it could integrate with. So wanting to stay close to the upstream, community code base.
Yep.
And then day two operations, wanting a way to scale and support this at scale.
Absolutely. And the third one is obviously getting somebody to do a managed services, right? Mm-hmm. One of the challenges of any open source, any early technology that's in the early stages of maturity, right? It takes some time to mature. So there are a lot of new features and functionalities keep pouring in. How do you keep it operable in a 24/7 follow the sun global cloud operations?
Yeah.
So you are now need to get into managed services option. Who can do the best? Who can not only help you in the implementation phase because of lack of domain expertise, finding resources that are very skilled in Kubernetes, which is hard to come by in Silicon Valley, and outside Silicon Valley, it's worse, right? So you need to factor in your operations of 24/7. Now you need like 12 to 15 or 18 people, 24/7, 365 to run with it, with the domain expertise around it. And you need to start thinking about service reliability engineering on top of it. It's a big thing for you to not only build and implement this kind of projects or applications to customers, it's also going to take you time. So the last thing you want to worry is that if there is some nirvana of managed services operator who can not only do monitoring, holistic healing, give you the 24/7 aggressive SLAs and get the upgrades up to date, that solves that problem, right? And that's the key to arriving at some kind of a decision, because again, it's a SaaS, software as a service. So we need to think as service availability it's not like the infrastructure uptime. And whether it's a public cloud or a private cloud or a hybrid cloud, at the end of the day, the service needs to be up all the time.
Okay. So when you were starting your journey with Kubernetes at Juniper, what were you and your leadership team talking about? What did success look like? Did you have a vision? Did you have a concrete vision or a desire of a goal for milestone of what in an ideal world you wanted to be able to deliver for the organization?
I had a very aggressive timeline, right? I was basically taking on a digital transformation, right, of DevOps and CI/CD and all other stuff. So having an aggressive timeline, getting your due diligence done in terms of technology evaluations, along with the vendor POCs and the pilots, implementation phase, all that stuff. The end outcome was that basically that I would be able to deploy, right, in a platform or in a technology stack that can scale out, available, managed, operated, meet the SLAs in 6 months.
6 months.
6 months.
But this is in a global. Give us a sense for this is a globally distributed organization.
Between Asia and the US, right? I need to balance it out, right? And between those two, I need to deploy multiple clusters, right? And get this thing up and running. And to me, I didn't have a lot of domain experts knowing Kubernetes, right? I didn't have people, awesome architects who can go do pilots and the POCs, the army of architects who can go do that. I didn't have that. Obviously, money was not just flowing out, so there I had a budget that I need to meet, timeline I need to meet. At the same time, I need to get this thing out the door and operate it 24/7, 365, and keep up with all the upgrades or the updates that the Kubernetes keep coming out, right? That needs to be vetted out in a blue-green deployment, right? And then so that it doesn't impact the current applications, right? So all those things need to be, due diligence needs to be done. That's a big, going from all the way from requirements gathering all the way to operations. So the full life cycle had to be thought out.
So you had a long list of requirements. And this was something that your developers within the company would use at scale, right? So there's thousands of users?
Yeah, absolutely.
On an everyday basis? So
on an everyday basis, yes.
So it's a pretty significant challenge.
Yeah.
When you were thinking about this, clearly the speed, 6 months of getting this out to production, and supporting this at scale in a geographically distributed manner, and then the talent challenges, right? In Silicon Valley, you're based in Silicon Valley.
Absolutely.
It's not easy here, and unfortunately, as you mentioned, it's probably worse outside Silicon Valley, right?
Absolutely.
And so this led you to, I'm sure when you were evaluating Platform 9, you probably thought about alternatives, right? And the most common alternatives you hear about in the Kubernetes space are, like a commercial software distribution based on Kubernetes or a do-it-yourself approach. What are your thoughts? How did you and your leadership team, how did you think about some of these trade-offs?
So it's a learning experience, right? So obviously, from my past experience and where I'm embarking on this project, right, I need to think through, I need to have an architecture, right? I need to have functional, non-functional requirements that needs to be defined. I need to define the evaluation criteria, all that stuff. I need to look at all the few vendors. There are many, right? So you need to look at choose top 2 or 3, right? Then I need to do a POC and a pilot. That all of these things takes time and effort. And then on top of it, I don't have many resources that have a lot of this Kubernetes experience. So how do you jumpstart that piece, right, on top of it? And then I need to obviously run operations. Cloud operations running at scale is the key at the end of the day, because whatever you might have implemented, how much ever you might have put in the effort and sweat into it, at the end of the day, your outcome is based on how you operate it and how you deliver it to the high level of SLAs, meaning requirements on it, right? So when you think about all these things, you have a lot of technology due diligence happening in one thread, the evaluation criteria happening in one thread, operational thing that you need to think through right away, domain expertise you need to think through. So what I had to go through is I did look at one or two commercial software, right? Along with a managed service operations perspective, and that's where I looked at you guys. I've looked at other companies in that area, and I looked at Platform 9, and I obviously did the due diligence of going through pilot and POCs with you guys, and as well as other commercial vendors, right? So that is a time well spent because if I make a mistake there, it's going to show up when I'm starting to deliver the service. So that is where commercial software would have worked great, right? But obviously, operation-wise, I'm still have other responsibilities of running cloud operations for other things that are already in operations. So I don't have a lot of resources that I can just go train yourself in Kubernetes, go run with it in operation. That is not easy effort to get somebody out there, right? It takes a big learning experience for them.
So ultimately, you went with Platform 9, and I'd like to maybe talk about our point of view in terms of what's important from an operations point of view. But for you, Ravi, from your journey as a customer with us, what ultimately were you concerned about? So if you were, you had
my concern about was, hey, would I get any help at all during implementation phase? Because I have worked with zillions of vendors and technology companies in the last 25 years. It's always a professional services engagement, and that's again bait and switch model, right? You pay some money, they put a SOW, and you deviate small amount, they're going to not help you, right? So getting to know what you need to implement, how you want to implement all the stuff, it's a nightmare. So
to somebody who's considering, who maybe is newer to the space, Ravi, doesn't have the 25 years of battle experience that you've had, what would you advise them if they were thinking about like a professional services approach to running Kubernetes, which in open source, to be fair, right? That's been a common way by which people have been running open source technologies over the years. And as open source is relatively young, if you in the history of software, open source is relatively young.
It's also a known fact that whenever there's open source, it's not free, right? You have to have resources dedicated to keep it up, feeding it 24/7, right? Because you need to customize it, you need to build up the domain knowledge, you need to build up the expertise on it, you need to put in a lot of resources who are willing to dig deep into an open source. It's not something that you just one click button and it goes installs and it runs and it's highly available. You have to put in a lot of effort on an open source. That's a known fact of the past, right? So having some service provider who can give me open source and who can keep it upgraded, keep it operated, keep it monitored. That's why Red Hat Linux is very successful, right? So you beat out all the other forms of it because it's an oxygen, right? Operating system is an oxygen. Everybody needs it. That's a baseline. So that's how they scale their business. Obviously, Kubernetes stack platform 9 is the one that's going to meet that, right? If you want to run Kubernetes and you want to get your projects out the door on time, quick, this is a good way to get going on, get some successes out, learn from it, and then you figure out a next strategy.
So maybe just to contrast it for our audience, in comparison to a professional services approach to running open source software, Platform 9's model is to bring SaaS-based management to open source technologies such as Kubernetes and OpenStack and serverless functions. And so what we are able to bring is, and again, we're not throwing people at the problem. So our company is built on this notion that open source needs to be easier to use. And so we build systems that manage open source deployments. So our core SaaS-based offering runs on infrastructure anywhere. So in your case, Ravi, you decided to run it all on-prem within your data centers for InfoSec reasons. It was very sensitive. But you're able to use our SLA, our SaaS-based SLA for Kubernetes. And what that means is that your Kubernetes clusters are being monitored 24/7 by 365. There's a 99.9% SLA guarantee on the health of Kubernetes itself. And we are proactively detecting any issues You don't need to have people on staff who are doing that.
Yeah.
We can even feed it out to your NOC centers. We are doing upgrades and security patching entirely orchestrated from the cloud, but within your change control windows. So there was a recent example of there were two CVEs, one in the December timeframe and I think one in the February timeframe that were pretty significant for Kubernetes. And a lot of people that were running Kubernetes were struggling. I had a number of people reach out in that window because they were struggling to roll out security fixes. Going back to your point, these are critical security vulnerabilities. Platform 9 customers were upgraded within 48 hours without lifting a finger, right?
Yep.
And those upgrades were orchestrated from the cloud with our platform, but with our solutions architects watching over them.
Yep.
And they're non-disruptive to the applications, right? Because with Kubernetes, you can orchestrate rolling upgrades, which are non-disruptive to the application.
Absolutely. That's also key because we want, obviously, one of the things I did not mention is in typical operations, maintenance is a nightmare. Taking a maintenance window on a non-stop SaaS offering is a nightmare. Nobody likes maintenance windows. And this Platform 9 with the Kubernetes deployment allows us to do what is called rolling upgrades without taking anybody down at any point in time. And those are some of the things we are leveraging out of it.
And so did you consider, Ravi, the option of going to a public cloud Kubernetes service like a Google Container Engine or an Amazon EKS?
That could be part of our future roadmap. But right now, we want to prove this. We want to make it work. We want to be non-disruptive and then go from there.
So right now you're running entirely on-prem, and you're running it entirely as a private cloud-like architecture. So tell us, now that you're getting to production, and in fact you've gotten into production, what are some of the results you're able to see? What was the developers' experience before this initiative?
Yeah.
And today, for the developers who have access to this cloud platform within Juniper, what does the before and after look like from a developer's point of view?
Well, the basic objectives of this project was to improve availability, right?
Okay.
Improve the SLAs, right? Improve the incident management parts of it, right? And stabilize the environment.
Okay.
I'm getting all this for. That means
have you had any availability issues?
Zero.
Any incidents?
That is the last thing I worry about nowadays, because in every company I work, everything is great as long as it keeps running, and the minute I take an outage, you get hammered, right?
That's and it's the ops teams that get.
That's a cloud operations role, right? You get hammered. Suddenly, you'll get to hear executives you have never spoken to them for years. You have an outage. So that's a classic example. So
if you want to get to know your C-suite,
there you go. So this was absolutely. So this is the last thing I need to. As I said, I didn't have to worry about doing implementation phase because Platform 9 was there in helping me get over some of the constraints of Kubernetes, right? The cluster one is a classic example. You can't go more than 50 nodes, right? So we had to break it down into 2, 3 multiple clusters to run with it. That's a classic example. So these are all the things when you implement a new technology, new emerging technology, you won't know all this finer print, right? And some of them may be in the backlog of Kubernetes to be done somewhere in the future. So you need to know those limitations, right? You might have done functional evaluation, but this you would not have even known to do whether that is a restriction, right? So so you guys were able to help us there during implementation. Then once we are in operations, you guys are helping us further along.
And so it's taken you about 6 months to scale this globally across Juniper.
Yes.
How does that compare with maybe what Juniper was running an OpenStack cloud before?
Yeah.
And Ravi, you've seen OpenStack and Cloud Foundry and VMware cloud deployments in Predix, GE, and before. Yeah. How does this compare? How long would it have taken?
Yeah. So from my perspective, this has been the seamless implementation what I've seen, because I would always be concerned about these infrastructure rollouts, stack rollouts, platform rollouts. They always have surprises when they go into operations and in production. This is the one I'm probably fortunate to say that there's nothing that I've come across that is the last thing I worry about on this.
Okay. And in terms of the incidents and the outages, in the other experiences, how would that have compared?
That, as I said, those projects gave me a heartache, right? A lot of challenges during implementation and going into production. Once in production, you're up all night in many of these implementations, right? Boy, let it be any platform or anything that I've used in the past, uh, either due to the lack of a perfect flexible architecture or workloads are not designed for that kind of an architecture on the platform. The challenges have always been that running it in production has been a challenge in other platforms, whatever I've seen so far. And given what we have with Kubernetes and the clustering and all the other things that's coming up that we're running today, um, as I said, I've never had any critical incidents on any of it.
Okay, very good. How long do you think it would have taken you if you hadn't gone with Platform 9 to get to this deployment stage that you have, where you have the level of global deployments today? If you had to go with an alternative, either a professional services approach or a do-it-yourself,
So easily added another 6 to 12 months to it
to get that.
to get that. Yeah.
And so that's a pretty expensive proposition because there's an opportunity cost to the business, to the company, to take that long.
Correct.
And then the ongoing operation would have been an unknown, right?
Correct.
And based on your past experience, there's been a pretty significant difference.
Absolutely. Day-to-day operations is a nightmare. If you don't know how to resolve the issues and how you isolate the issue and how you have a backup to bring it up, all other stuff, it's not, that's been a challenge.
Okay.
In the past.
Okay. Very good. Any technology comparisons in terms of how maybe something like Kubernetes compares with the likes of Cloud Foundry or OpenStack or VMware?
I guess, as I said, right, it's an evolution process, right? I wanted to be at the atomic level of building the stack independent of any platform, right? So I wanted to have more freedom in scaling it out, more freedom in terms of keeping it upgraded, more freedom in having additional services without a long integration life cycles, right? That the Kubernetes basically has been the one that I was able to finally realize when compared to the other platforms in play.
So you've been able to realize this vision that you had with Kubernetes, and you in the past struggled with getting there with some of these alternatives.
Correct. Yeah, simple thing like portability. Yeah, something works on, example, on AWS, they still need to port it to Azure, or from Azure, they need to port it to GCP. So there are a lot of things. You need to be more aligned with the vendor in a platform play, right? If the vendor priorities are something doesn't match or align with yours, you just gotta wait it out.
Okay.
In this case, I don't have that limitation.
So as you think about, maybe to wrap up our session and then we can get into the questions, Ravi, as you think about, the operational side of Kubernetes and scaling it and implementing it is, Platform 9 is taking care of that for you. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So what are you spending your time on, and what are some of your things this has freed you up to do to any execs like you who are on the call, or any emerging execs or leaders who are on the call? How would you encourage them to think about, instead of spending your time running Kubernetes, here are other things that you're doing that are adding more value to the organization?
Yeah. So in a solution stack, right, Kubernetes is one layer of it.
Yeah.
Right. You gotta worry about the network. You gotta worry about the compute. You gotta worry about storage. And in a massive storage requirements of multi-petabyte storage, you need to figure out how would they scale out. You have three things to worry about: compute, network, storage, and that is a full-time job. You got to figure out what is your efficient technology stack that you need to have, and how you build those things into your cloud architecture, right? And that's where I spend most of my time nowadays. And was spending there too.
And you're also spending a lot of time, Ravi, because I've been in some of these meetings with you, with your developers, evangelizing this new platform with the development community.
Correct.
And getting
That's
them.
a change management that happens whenever you have a digital transformation project. Yeah. Change management is key in anything that you do, right? Transformations will only succeed through change management, and that's where the evangelization comes along. You focus more and more on that and on those transformations, and thank God that I don't have to worry about the orchestration, the operational, the upgrades, running it 24/7, incident management, outages, those kind of things. I don't spend much time.
So you're spending some time, especially there's a change in the programming model.
Yeah.
Somebody who was used to programming to like virtual machines,
yeah, correct.
The change to containers brings about changes in terms of how they need to think and adapt.
Yeah, yeah.
So these are the kinds of things that you're trying to pave the path.
Correct. That's part of your innovation and that's part of your progress, right? So you're moving away for better efficiency.
From monolithic to microservices for better efficiency.
That's right.
And to me personally, Ravi, I think it's been at a very personal level. I think it's been great to finally have you as a customer. We've known each other for since your days at GE.
Thank you.
And I think it's really interesting to see how last week Google announced Anthos, which is I think a very similar architectural approach to Platform 9. It's a SaaS managed solution. It's not like a professional services solution. It's not a software distribution. It's a managed solution, but it's SaaS.
Yeah.
And I think that the industry, traditional approaches to private and hybrid clouds have struggled because of the complexity of running these technology platforms.
Yeah. In a service-based industry, it's all about running.
It's all about outcomes that you can provide to the business, right?
That's
And
your
so
outcome.
I think this industry as a whole, the whole private and hybrid cloud industry, I think is definitely heading towards a direction of managed open source.
Yeah.
And I think it's exciting for us at Platform 9 to have been a part of this journey and creating this, I think, approach of managed open source, which I think the cloud providers actually do, but they've historically only done that within their data centers.
Okay.
And Platform 9 has been able to bring that for the world to use with any infrastructure of their choice.
Absolutely.
Right?
You're able to bring out the serverless computing, the OpenStack, and the Kubernetes that the companies and the enterprises can leverage and get the outcomes faster.
Yeah. So it's about speed, it's about simplicity, it's about savings, right? Those three can drive.
Yeah. And address the enterprise security at the same time.
Absolutely. So that wraps our session. Ravi, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Let's take some questions from the audience. I know there's over 100 people on the call, so it'd be great to see the kinds of questions that the audience has.
Yeah, okay, great. So so we do have plenty of time for audience questions. So if you have a question for either Sirish or Ravi, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. Okay, first question here. Let's see. It looks like, Ravi, this one is for you. Have you considered using public cloud Kubernetes, and what drove you to do it on premises?
Yeah, so there were some internal restrictions on IP and all other stuff, right? So this is our first step to getting there. So the initial thing was to go internally, make it work, scale it, learn from it, and then probably in the future, we would have that opportunity of running in the public cloud.
All right, great. Next question. Oh, sorry, did you want to add on to that?
No, it's just part of the transformation phase.
Okay. Okay. All right, great. Next question, Sirish, I think this one is for you. What is the advantage of using Platform 9's Kubernetes versus other public cloud offerings?
So the Platform 9 solution has broadly, I would say, three major advantages. The first one is that it runs anywhere. I think Ravi's actually, Juniper's running it on premises on a bare metal environment, right? You chose not to use VMs at all. You chose to run it entirely on bare metal with a Linux environment that's actually being managed by Platform 9 as well. So you can go from bare metal. We support VMware environments. We support KVM or OpenStack-based environments, whether you have your own or you want to use Platform 9's OpenStack solution for the IaaS layer. And we support public cloud environments, not just one of them. So we support the big three clouds, but also IBM SoftLayer and other third-party clouds that are emerging, such as Packet Host and others. So first is the freedom to run absolutely anywhere and not having any lock-in towards any one cloud provider.
Lock-in is the key, right? Because in a platform play, you're locked in.
Yeah. The whole public cloud platform, that's the challenge people run into, is that they feel locked in.
Yeah.
The second one I would say is being something that Ravi alluded to earlier in our conversation was being able to align closely with upstream open source. Platform 9's toolchain is essentially based on standard open source technologies. So for example, with Kubernetes, not only do you get Kubernetes, but we're also working on managed Prometheus and managed Alert Manager, managed Istio, and managed Percona SQL and other data services that are coming out of the CNCF ecosystem. In contrast, when you run in the public cloud, any one public cloud provider, they typically have their own monitoring systems. You have something like Stackdriver from Google. You might have like a CloudWatch or other. And so you may not be locked into Kubernetes. EKS and GKE are upstream Kubernetes, like Platform 9. They're very closely aligned to upstream. But the surrounding services that make them a platform are unique and proprietary to those clouds, which means that ultimately your application and your operations are vetted, end up getting coupled to their unique public cloud secret sauce. So if you really want to use Kubernetes as a way to do multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, you need a tool chain that is going to give you the complete flexibility to say write once and one set of runbooks that will run anywhere. And we are able to provide that in a way that the public cloud providers cannot, because we're not in the business of selling you any infrastructure, unlike the public cloud providers, right, which are essentially trying to get you to use their infrastructure. We're truly agnostic. We want to be Switzerland with respect to infrastructure and let customers make the choices that they want to make.
That's part of the evolution process, right? Today you may be running on Amazon, and who knows, some for strategic reasons, you might be asked to run on Azure, or you might be asked to run on GCP, or you might want to bring it in. How this all evolves. You want to have a flexible architecture that you can run anywhere. And this is where Platform 9 gets you there.
And I think Kubernetes also is a big contributor to that, right? I think Kubernetes now gives us a way where you can, for the first time, develop an app once and develop a runbook once, an operational runbook once, and have that be truly portable. But that only works if you have a truly multi-cloud Kubernetes platform. And the public cloud Kubernetes platforms are not as multi-cloud as Platform 9 because it works anywhere.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Next question then. Let's see. Got so many of them here. The next question, I think you may have actually already answered this one, Ravi, but where are you running Kubernetes today? Is it bare metal or on virtualized infrastructures? And then also, okay, all right, great. So what are you, the pros and cons for each of those, and what are your future considerations for them?
I know that in our conversation, Ravi, one of the reasons you did not want to go with VMs is you wanted to minimize the complexity of the stack.
Complexity, right? And also cost of license.
Yeah.
Right?
So your point, I think, was that you're saying that, look, ultimately my developer experience is going to be Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And I want the minimal stack and the lowest cost.
Yeah, that's ease of troubleshooting, right? License management costs and keeping it simple.
Yeah.
The KISS principle.
Well, I'll give you maybe a counterpoint to that. These are the pros and cons, right? I think Ravi had the luxury of, doing something greenfield. I think he had a vision, and he was starting with a blank sheet of paper in terms of how to architect that vision.
Yeah.
Other customers that we work with may have a massive VMware deployment, and it may just be easier for you to use the VMware environment that you have and not rock that ship, because VMware is a very high quality hypervisor. And if it's a sunk cost for you as an organization, the switching cost is not maybe worth it, right? So it varies, I think, depending on the nature of the organization and the nature of the infrastructure landscape that they have. For some organizations, I think if you have a good existing investment that's a sunk cost in virtualization technology, then I think there's no harm in using that. And in fact, I would actually say that there's certainly some OpenStack customers of ours who are running Kubernetes on top of the OpenStack provider, where you get the full IaaS platform from OpenStack, and it makes some things easier. For example, load balancing is easier in Kubernetes when you have an underlying load balancer, which is provided by an OpenStack platform or a VMware platform with NSX. So these are the pros and cons. The desire to have lowest cost and simplicity versus the desire to work with an existing investment and maybe to have a full set of features like load balancing, which are easier when you have a virtualized environment.
Yeah.
All right, great. Next question. How do you achieve zero downtime upgrades?
So I'll take that question. The way we do zero downtime upgrades is that upgrades are done on a per customer basis, and Platform Nine's architecture has a management plane, and then there's the actual Kubernetes clusters themselves. The Platform 9 management plane is upgraded by Platform 9 and does not have any impact on the application downtime because applications are being managed by Kubernetes, not by Platform 9 per se. Once the Platform 9 management plane is up to date, it then allows operators to check a box or use an API call to orchestrate an upgrade on a per cluster basis. You can choose to upgrade clusters in parallel or do it one at a time. For any given cluster, the upgrade is actually done in a rolling orchestrated fashion. So based on policy, it could be one node at a time or it could be multiple nodes at a time. Those nodes are drained. Draining is a concept in Kubernetes that Kubernetes has concept support for. So if your application is written to the Kubernetes API and design principles, then it allows Kubernetes to detect a node failure or a node about to be decommissioned and drain the workloads that are running on that node into other nodes in the cluster, and then evacuate that node, and then bring up a new version or a new node or as a replacement for that node. And so this is how the upgrade is orchestrated. And so it's individual nodes or sets of nodes are drained, and in sequence, the workloads that are running on those nodes are actually evacuated to other nodes in the cluster without any downtime. This is something Kubernetes does as long as you build your application to Kubernetes principles. And then the entire cluster is upgraded in that fashion. But all of this requires a lot of orchestration, right? It goes back to you kind of have to invent and build in tools and technologies like this. And that's kind of what Platform 9 does as a service. So this is a big part of our value proposition. What this gives us is the freedom to stay up to date. So we're always within the latest N-1 or N-2. We're no more than two versions behind the latest release of Kubernetes. And that's because we've invested in operational technologies such as these, which allow us to keep up to date.
And it's also critical because, as I said, when in the early stages of any open source, there's a lot of releases that keeps coming out, and keeping up to speed on that.
And paradoxically, it's a paradox because
you want it, but you can't afford it.
You can't risk the downtime or the impact. And paradoxically, the more nascent the technology is, the more important it is for you to be updating because the stability, bug fixes, features that are getting fleshed out.
That's right.
And Kubernetes, if you step back, and even though it's been around for a few years now, if you step back and look at it in the long arc of history, it's still very much an emerging technology. And I think it's very important that you don't get stuck on an island. I think one of the, candidly, Ravi, I'd love to get your thoughts. I think this is one of the big problems that OpenStack had, is that there were just too many people who had deployed OpenStack with some kind of in-house tools or people or consultants or professional services, and they weren't able to keep up to date. And so over time, they just couldn't get past the bugs and the rough edges. But the reality is they deployed it when it was early, and they never got to see, that version of OpenStack that had those issues fixed.
Agreed. And in fact, you can count the number of companies who are really running OpenStack in production
because of these issues, right?
Yeah.
All right, great. So next question then. Do you support serverless as well?
Yes, so we support serverless with an open source project called Fission. So it's Fission. You can go to fission.io or check it out on Twitter. Fission was, in fact, the original serverless project for Kubernetes. So Fission is a Kubernetes native functions as a service platform. It runs on any Kubernetes system, not just Platform 9, but any upstream Kubernetes version. And Platform 9 supports serverless via Fission. Fission has some really interesting capabilities, such as record and replay. It has integration with Prometheus for monitoring. It has a workflow engine that is really powerful. So you can write not just individual serverless functions, but orchestrate more complex application logic across collections of functions and sequence the execution across them. And people tend to love Fission because it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of the cold start performance and the cost performance trade-off. For those of you who are deep into serverless, you know that there's this well-known problem with the cost performance trade-off in serverless. And Fission gives you, I think, a lot of flexibility around that. It takes advantage of Kubernetes as the underlying cluster orchestrator to drive greater efficiency in that trade-off.
All right, great. We are about 10 minutes to the top of the hour, so we have time for, I think, 2 or 3 more questions before we close it out. Our next question is, let's see, what target infrastructure does Platform 9 managed Kubernetes run on, and how easy is it to deploy on various targets?
So it supports, the set of targets ranges from bare metal environments to virtualized environments such as VMware or OpenStack or Nutanix, to public cloud environments such as Amazon, Azure, Google, IBM Cloud. If you can, and generally, if you can run Linux on it, you should be able to run Platform 9 on it. And if you can run, if it has VMware, then you can run Platform 9 on it. And then there's others like Nutanix that we have support for that may not meet either of those criteria. So it's a pretty broad range of deployment targets that you can support.
All right, great. Let's see, next question. So many of them. How do you scale out this? I believe this one is for you, Ravi. How do you scale out your Kubernetes cluster as demand goes up for infrastructure resources?
Well, I think the scale out is based on clustering, right? So as you continue to scale out, you can keep adding clusters as many as you want. And then obviously the number of nodes that you run within the cluster is already highly available. And across the clusters, it's highly available. So this is a scale out architecture. So it's the scale out is built into the architecture. That is, as I was alluding earlier in the conversation, this kind of operational or non-functional requirements of scale-out architecture, high availability is all built
into Kubernetes.
Into the Kubernetes, and I think that's the best part of it. And that's the reason many of the things that I've been running into the last 20, 30 years. I think this is a big win for me from that perspective, and I don't have to worry about physically implementing or logically implementing high availability architectures.
And the traditional approach of doing HA and DR is very complex running those tests and the beauty I think if you maybe step back and look at it a little more strategically.
Yeah.
In the olden paradigm, in the monolithic paradigm, if I can call it that, before Kubernetes, scale-out was a bit of an afterthought, or failover was a bit of an afterthought. You build your application, then you figure out, how do I get this to failover? Whereas I think with Kubernetes, it's kind of built in by design, and so you'd have to do something pretty drastic to get it to not support scale-up.
Correct.
And so that's the beauty, and it's one of the many benefits I think Kubernetes is able to offer.
Absolutely.
All right, great. So it looks like at this point we are going to have to close out the Q&A section. If we didn't get to your question, I apologize, but please know that the folks at Platform 9 will be getting a copy of all of the questions. So I'm sure they'll be more than happy to follow up with you offline. We do have a gift card drawing to get to, but before we do that, I want to actually kind of open it up to our speakers today to kind of give us their final thoughts. Our takeaways from today's event, if you will. So I'm send it back over to you guys.
Ravi, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, from a business point of view, if you want to get the technology stacks and implementation rollouts, the last thing you need to worry by going with P9 solves your problem of running it in cloud or running it in 24/7 environment, managed, maintained, monitored. I think I would say those words and leave it at that, because that is where your ultimate outcome or the goal in anything that you do in any project is to serve your customers. And you need to get to it as fast and as quickly as possible with all the functional and non-functional things built into it. And your goal should be to get something like managed services options that you have so that you can gain your experience and learn from it, and launch it to your customers and be more successful from a business point of view.
Thank you, Ravi. It's been a pleasure to have you on this webinar with the team at DevOps.com. So I would summarize by saying if you were to step back and look at the longer arc of history, I think hybrid cloud, we've been talking about it for a long time. It's finally happening. And I think that the core technology that's going to be the predominant way in which hybrid clouds are going to be run are going to be these managed open source technologies such as Platform 9 and Google Anthos. I don't think professional services, most people haven't had a great experience with professional services or the traditional distribution approach. I think that approach, it's a good way to maybe get started and dip your feet in the water, but when you really need to provide an outcome that your customers within your organization can bank upon, I think that the managed open source approach gives you the speed and efficiency, operational efficiency of a fully managed SaaS-like service combined with the best of breed multi-cloud, not lock-in, and access to innovation that the open source community is able to provide. So I think that's my closing thoughts in terms of the future.
All right, great. Well, thank you both. Appreciate it. Before we close things out, I do want to go ahead and do our drawing for three $50 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, let's look at our first winner is Andrew Campbell. Congratulations, Andrew. Our second winner is Marcelo Bonin. I think I pronounced that correctly. Congratulations, Marcelo. And our final winner today is Scott Marshall. Congratulations, Scott. Those are our three winners for today. So congratulations to all of you guys. Real quick, want to remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to listen to it again, you will have the opportunity to do so. We are going to be sending out an email after today's webinar that will include a link to access the webinar on demand. And please know that the webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website, so you can always find it there. Just go to the webinar section on DevOps.com under upcoming, and on demand, and it should be right there waiting for you. And while you're on the site, please take a moment to take a look at all of the other webinars that we have, both upcoming and on demand. Hopefully there'll be one or two that pique your interest. Sirish and Ravi, thank you so much for your time today. Great conversations. Learned a lot. It's just, I love to hear about all these case studies and deployment stories. So thank you very much for the information. I'm sure the audience got a lot out of it also. And I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.